I asked for a break, thinking my husband would wait, but he found someone else. The words sound simple when I say them out loud, but in my head, they scream with regret. How did I get here? Standing in front of our old apartment building, I feel like a stranger to the life I once had. I can almost see us, laughing on the balcony, planning our future, but that was before I asked for time apart, before everything changed. You think you'll get time to fix things when you ask for a break, don't you? That they'll wait, just like in the movies. It's a dangerous kind of hope, and it makes you believe you're still in control. But you're not. Life has a cruel way of showing you how quickly someone can slip through your fingers. I've been holding on to this moment for too long, rehearsing what I'd say when I finally saw him again. But no words seem right when you've lost someone you thought would always be there. As I wait for the door to open, I wonder if this is really what I wanted. To walk back into a life where I'm no longer welcome. Then the door swings open, and there he is. Lucas. My Lucas, or at least he was. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. A woman appears behind him, her hand resting gently on his back. She looks young, too young. And the way they stand together, it's clear that this isn't just some rebound.
No.
She's the someone else. Lucas and I met when I was 24 and he was 26. It was one of those effortless romances where everything just clicked. He was ambitious, charismatic, and made me laugh in ways no one else ever had. I remember the first night we spent together after a mutual friend introduced us at a bar. He asked me if I wanted to escape for a walk on the beach, and before I could even respond, I was already in his car, excitement buzzing in my chest. We stayed out there for hours, just talking, as the waves crashed against the shore. That's the night I knew. We both knew. Our early years together were filled with late-night talks, spontaneous trips, and the kind of closeness that made us inseparable. We got married a year after that. I remember feeling like I'd hit the jackpot. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner, loyal, strong, and always willing to support me. We built a life together, piece by piece. I had a good job, and he was climbing the ladder in his career. But somewhere along the way, we got comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. The adventures faded, and the late-night talks became sporadic, overtaken by tiredness from work. Our love was still there, but it was wrapped in routine and predictability. By the time I turned 30, I started questioning everything. Was this it? The spark that we had at the beginning felt like a distant memory. Lucas, now 32, was busier than ever with work, and we barely saw each other. When we did, it felt like we were two ships passing in the night. We had fights, nothing too big at first, but the tension simmered underneath. It got to the point where I couldn't recognize the man I fell in love with. I began to feel lost, like the woman I used to be was slipping away. I thought space would help us reconnect. I told Lucas I needed time to figure things out, to focus on myself for a while. We agreed to take a break, no hard feelings, just time to clear our heads. I convinced myself it was the right thing to do, that we would come back stronger. After all, he loved me, and I loved him. We'd get through this, right? But as soon as I left, a strange feeling settled into my bones. It wasn't freedom like I imagined it would be. Instead, I felt a void, like something crucial was missing from my life. I tried to distract myself, went on solo trips, reconnected with old friends, threw myself into work. But nothing filled that emptiness. I thought I just needed more time. I was wrong. It wasn't long before I began to regret asking for a break. Every time I picked up my phone to call Lucas, I hesitated, telling myself I needed just a little more time to figure things out. But deep down, I knew. I missed him. I missed us. I missed the way he used to look at me like I was the only person in the room. One night, I finally decided to call. It had been 3 months since we'd last spoken. I had imagined our conversation going 1,000 different ways, but I never expected the coldness I heard in his voice. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart was racing. "I've been thinking, maybe we should talk, about us." There was a pause. Then he sighed. "I don't know if there's an us to talk about anymore, Mia." Those words hit me like a punch in the gut. I tried to stay calm, but panic set in. "What do you mean?" "Lucas, We just needed some space, that's all. We can work through this. I'm ready to come back, to try again. Silence. It stretched on for what felt like forever. Mia, I've met someone. There it was. The twist I hadn't seen coming. I felt the world tilt beneath me, like the ground wasn't solid anymore. What do you mean? You've met someone? My voice came out strangled, the disbelief mixing with an unfamiliar sense of desperation. Lucas was quiet for a moment, and I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, steady and calm, like he was completely at peace with what he was about to say. I didn't plan for it to happen, Mia. We were taking a break, and he paused again, searching for the right words, as if he could soften the blow. I met her a couple of months ago. Months? I couldn't wrap my heart for 3 months. I repeated, the reality slowly sinking in. And you're already seeing someone else? Mia, it's not like that. His tone changed, now more defensive. I didn't go looking for this. We were taking time apart to figure things out, remember? You said you wanted space. You said we both needed it. I asked for a break, not for you to replace me, Lucas. I shot back, feeling the tears sting at the corners of my eyes. My breath hitched in my throat as I tried to contain the flood of emotions crashing into me all at once. Anger, sadness, disbelief. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was sit there, my phone pressed against my ear, hoping that somehow this was just a nightmare I'd wake up from. I didn't replace you, Lucas said, his voice softening again, like he was trying to explain to a child why things couldn't go back to the way they were. But you left, Mia. You asked for this time apart. I didn't know what was going to happen, and I wasn't expecting to meet someone. But it just happened. It just happened. That phrase, so simple, so casual, ignited something in me, like it was some accident he tripped into, not a conscious choice he made. Who is she? I asked, barely above a whisper. Mia. Asterisk, who is she? Asterisk. I demanded now, anger pushing the tears back. Her name was Chloe. Chloe. I'd never heard him mention her before. She wasn't one of his friends, someone I could picture, someone I'd met at a party or dinner. No, she was a stranger, a phantom that had quietly slipped into the cracks of our relationship while I was out here trying to piece myself together. She works in the same building as me, Lucas admitted, and the weight of it crushed me further. We started talking one day, just casually at first, and then his voice trailed off like he didn't want to say the rest, but I didn't need him to. I could fill in the blanks myself. I knew exactly how it went, how one casual conversation leads to more, how familiarity becomes flirtation, and how flirtation spirals into something deeper when no one's paying attention. I pictured them in my mind, meeting for coffee during lunch breaks, sharing stories, laughing at each other's jokes, growing closer in the very spaces that used to belong to me. My stomach churned as I imagined the moments I wasn't there for, the moments where she stepped in. So, that's it. I finally said, my voice trembling, barely holding it together. You're just going to throw everything we had away because you found someone else? Lucas sighed again, and I hated how calm he sounded, like this was just another decision he had to make. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm trying to move forward, Mia. You were the one who wanted time apart. I waited. I gave you space. But in that space, things changed. I changed. I wanted to argue, to scream that he had no right to move on, not when we hadn't even tried to fix what was broken between us. But the truth was that he had a point. I was the one who walked away. I was the one who asked for the break. I thought I had time. I thought we could hit pause, and everything would stay frozen until I was ready to hit play again. I never wanted this, Lucas, I whispered, my heart breaking with each word. I never wanted us to end. I didn't either, he said, sounding genuinely regretful. But sometimes, things just don't work out the way we hope they will. There was another long silence. This time, it felt final, like we had both said everything that needed to be said, and there was nothing left to salvage. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the clock on the wall, watching the seconds tick by as my marriage dissolved right in front of me. I'm sorry, Mia, Lucas said softly, his voice now carrying a weight of finality. I really am. I could feel the tears rolling down my cheeks, my hand trembling as I gripped the phone tighter, wishing I could turn back time, undo the choices I had made. But it was too late. The damage was done, and I couldn't change it. "Goodbye, Lucas," I said, my voice cracking as I forced the words out. I hung up the phone, and the silence that followed was deafening. For the first time since we decided to take a break, I truly felt alone. Alone in the apartment we had shared together. Alone with the memories of a life I thought would always be there. Alone with the realization that the man I loved had moved on. In that silence, I realized something else too, a second twist that I hadn't seen coming. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my marriage. I was grieving the woman I used to be. The woman who believed she could control the future. The woman who thought she had all the time in the world to make things right. But life doesn't wait. And neither did Lucas. It's strange how life can feel like it's moving at a snail's pace and still somehow rush past you in a blur. After that phone call with Lucas, I spiraled. I wasn't sure what was more crushing, the fact that I had pushed him away or that he had actually let himself be pulled into someone else's orbit. I spent days in my apartment, replaying every moment of our relationship, trying to figure out where we went wrong. The silence of my place became unbearable, so I drowned it out with anything I could. Music, movies, even long walks where I didn't have to think. But the silence inside me? That was harder to shake. The weight of my decisions bore down on me with a force I hadn't anticipated. I started questioning everything, not just about Lucas, but about myself. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I was too distant. Maybe the break was a cover-up for something deeper inside me that I didn't want to face. The weeks after Lucas's confession dragged on, each day melding into the next. I tried to focus on my job, throwing myself into tasks that would keep me busy, but every time I paused, every time my mind had even a second of freedom, it wandered back to him, to her, to Chloe, the faceless woman who had stepped into my life and taken what I had foolishly let go. I couldn't help but imagine them together. Were they happy? Did she laugh at the same jokes I used to? Did she run her fingers through his hair the way I did when we watched movies on the couch? It was torturous, knowing that the man who used to be mine was now sharing those intimate moments with someone else. It didn't feel real, but then again, none of this did. One evening, just as I thought I had reached my lowest point, something snapped inside me. I had spent too long wallowing in regret. It was time to stop asking myself, what if, and start doing something about it. I couldn't change the past, but maybe, just maybe, I could change the future. That's when I decided I had to see Lucas in person. Phone calls weren't enough. Texts felt too distant. I needed to look him in the eye, to see if there was still a part of him that remembered us, that wanted what we had before it all fell apart. Maybe I was chasing a ghost, but I wasn't ready to give up without a fight. I rehearsed what I would say 1,000 times over in my head, imagining how he would respond. Would he be cold, like he was on the phone? Or would he look at me with the same warmth he used to, the warmth that made me believe we could get through anything? The day I decided to confront him, it was raining, fitting really. I showed up at our old apartment building, the one we had shared for years before I moved out. I felt a wave of nostalgia as I stood in front of the door. I was trembling, not from the cold, but from fear of what I might find on the other side. When the door finally opened, there he was, Lucas. He looked the same, but different, his expression more guarded, like he wasn't sure how to greet me. I could tell he was surprised to see me standing there, but he didn't say anything at first. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable, until I finally forced myself to speak. "I needed to see you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I needed to talk." He didn't invite me in right away. He stood in the doorway, his eyes searching mine, as if he was trying to figure out what I was doing there. After what felt like an eternity, he stepped aside and motioned for me to come in. I walked into the apartment that used to be our home, but now felt foreign. The furniture was the same, the pictures still hung on the walls, but there was a coldness to it, like it no longer belonged to me. And then I saw her. Chloe. She was sitting on the couch, her legs tucked under her as she glanced up at me. She wasn't what I expected. In fact, she looked ordinary. A plain face, wearing an old sweatshirt of Lucas's, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was the kind of girl you'd pass by on the street without a second thought. But here she was in my living room in my place. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I forced myself to keep my composure. I hadn't planned on this. I didn't think she'd be here, and I didn't know what to do now that she was. "Chloe, this is Mia," Lucas said awkwardly, his voice filled with tension. She offered me a polite smile, the kind of smile you give someone when you know they don't belong. "Nice to meet you," she said softly, like she wasn't the reason my life had been flipped upside down. I didn't respond. I couldn't. All I could think about was how Lucas and I used to sit on that same couch, how I used to wear his sweatshirts, how we used to curl up together after long days. And now it was her turn. "I won't take up too much of your time," I finally said, my eyes never leaving Lucas. "I just need to talk to you. Alone." Lucas shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Chloe before nodding. "Chloe, can you give us a minute?" She stood up, still smiling, like she was in on some secret I wasn't. As she walked past me to the bedroom, I felt an irrational urge to scream at her, to tell her to get out, that this wasn't her place. But I kept it in. I wasn't here to fight with her. I was here to get answers from Lucas. When the door clicked shut behind her, Lucas turned to me, his face unreadable. "What do you want to talk about, Mia?" I swallowed hard, trying to gather the courage to say what I had come here for. Now that I was standing in front of him, the words felt harder to find. But I couldn't leave without knowing, without hearing it from him. "Do you still love me?" The question escaped my lips before I could stop it. Lucas's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't answer right away. Instead, he let out a long, tired sigh, running a hand through his hair the way he always did when he was stressed. "Mia," his voice was soft, almost pleading. "We've been over this. I'll always care about you. You were a huge part of my life. But things are different now." "I don't care about what's different," I shot back, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "I need to know if there's still something between us. You can't just replace years of love with someone you barely know. We're still us, Lucas." "I know we are." He shook his head, his expression pained. "It's not that simple. You're holding on to something that isn't there anymore. We've both changed. But I haven't changed that much. Not in the ways that matter." Lucas didn't respond right away. He looked at me with an almost sorrowful expression, and I realized something in that moment. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He wasn't doing this out of spite or malice. He was simply done. Done with me. Done with us. I opened my mouth to say something, anything that could change his mind, but before I could speak, he said the words I dreaded most. "I'm in love with her, Mia. I'm in love with her, Mia." Those words hit like a punch to the gut. I stood there, frozen, as the air seemed to drain from the room. My heart was racing, my hands trembling. I knew this was what I had come for, the truth I had needed to hear, but it didn't make the blow any softer. "You don't mean that," I whispered, my voice cracking. "How could you? After everything we've been through? You can't love her, Lucas. You barely know her." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a sadness I hadn't seen before. I didn't want this to happen, but it did. I've spent the last few months getting to know her, and it's not like with us, Mia. It's easier. It feels right. I shook my head, unwilling to accept his words. "Easier? Is that what this is about? You're giving up on us because it's easier to be with her?" "It's not about giving up. It's about moving on. You and I, we had our time. But things changed. We changed. I didn't plan to fall in love with Chloe, but it happened, and I can't ignore that." Tears blurred my vision, and I blinked them back, refusing to let him see how much this was breaking me. I thought I could handle hearing the truth, but now that it was out there, it felt like I was drowning. "So that's it," I said, my voice shaking. "You're just going to walk away from everything we built, from the life we shared?" Lucas stepped closer, his expression soft but resolute. "I'm not walking away from what we had. I'll always value the time we spent together. But that chapter is over, Mia. I'm sorry." I felt a lump form in my throat as I realized he wasn't just saying goodbye to me. He was saying goodbye to us, to the version of us that I had been holding on to so tightly. And no matter how much I wanted to fight for him for what we had, I couldn't change the way he felt. I took a shaky breath, finally accepting the inevitable. I never thought it would end like this. Neither did I, Lucas said softly. But maybe this is what we both need. I nodded, though it felt more like a reflex than an agreement. I didn't have the strength to argue anymore. It was over, and I had to face that reality. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door. My hand lingered on the handle for a moment, as if I was waiting for him to stop me, to say something, anything, that would make this all go away. But he didn't. He just stood there, watching me, his silence confirming what I already knew. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The rain was still falling outside, the world moving on without us, just like Lucas had. And as I stood there, staring at the drops sliding down the window, I realized something. The twist wasn't that he had moved on with someone else. The twist was that I had been the one holding on to something that no longer existed. And now, for the first time, I had to figure out who I was without him. I wasn't sure where to start. But as I walked out of that apartment for the last time, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't look back anymore.